Hello, welcome to a new podcast starting this episode called The Rings of Power is Good, actually. My name is Quincy,
My name is Nadia.
and we are brother and sister who have loved The Lord of the Rings pretty much all our lives. My dad gave me The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings books when I was about 8 or 9 years old, and I devoured them and then immediately began telling my sisters about them. You can catch Nadia and I on a monthly podcast that is starting up again soon called Seven Stars, Seven Siblings, and One White Tree, where we talk with our seven siblings and other guests about The Lord of the Rings, Rings of Power, the books, Silmarillion, everything in Tolkien's world. But we're
Yeah,
starting this podcast to talk specifically about the Rings of Power show from Amazon Prime and why it's great and why Tolkien fans, if you've decided you don't like it or don't want to try it, should give it another chance, as well as people who aren't even Tolkien fans who maybe just like the Lord of the Rings movies or maybe just are wanting to try Lord of the Rings for the first time should give the show a chance.
yeah, no. We're definitely all big Tolkien fans in this family. So it's definitely my favorite book and movie. And yeah, again, I was justifiably a little skeptical when we first started The Rings of Power. I really wanted it to be good, and it really is. I feel like there's always criticisms of shows that are justified, but I think it's a little bit documented that there's an extra amount of hate for it. So I think just kind of getting some of those objections that people have that maybe aren't exactly very fair out of the way, or talking about some of the reasons why we really like it is one of the reasons we wanted to do the podcast. Also, there's so many fans that really love it. I feel like the hate is really loud sometimes, but if you actually like kind of get into pieces of the internet where people actually enjoy it, there's so many like fun, fanfic or just speculations about the show and appreciations of the actors that is really fun to kind of engage with. I really like to do that more than kind of give everybody who is kind of just posting Rings of Power sucks like a lot of airtime. It's more fun to
Yeah.
talk about something you like rather than be like, let's fight because you don't like it.
Yeah, yeah, and you like one of the things that we'll do probably in our next episode is respond to some of the common criticisms that you hear of the show. But I would say that Rings of Power hate is mostly an online meme. Like most of the people who don't like it, who hate it, who talk about how terrible it is, have not actually watched it, or if they watched it, they watched the first season once and didn't, spend enough time to kind of understand what they were trying to do the first season, or then try the second season, which I think was a lot easier for Tolkien traditionalists and fans of the Silmarillion to process and understand. So we'll talk about some of those things. But yeah, like Nadia said, we want to focus on the positives. And Nadia, we should give people some of our bona fides, I think. And Nadia and I both went to college, and Nadia majored in English, and I minored in English lit. Did you major in English lit or English? I forget.
English generally.
Okay, yeah, that's what I thought. Okay,
Yeah, and
yeah,
then
and
communications theater minor. Yeah.
you're right. And I was a communications major, so we kind of went the same. We went to the same school, Baldwin Wallace College. Shout out to Baldwin Wallace, who
We did do a
eliminated.
class together, and I'm just gonna say that I got a higher grade than Quincy, just so you know.
To be clear, which props to you, and you deserve it. But the I took that class when I was considering to go back and finish off an English major so that I could look at maybe being an English teacher. That was after I'd finished up my degree. But but yeah, you deserve that. And Nadia is an exceptional understander of literature. And of course, I also, which I'll put in the description of this episode, I have a whole list of my top 100 novels I've read. I love reading novels, classic novels, and modern novels that are maybe going to be classics. And that's one of my hobbies. And Lord of the Rings is my favorite novel and tops my list. And I don't think anyone will ever shake it out of that. So I think we got
Yeah.
some
Oh,
good,
oh,
and I
sorry.
was just
Yeah.
going to say we got some good ability to analyze literature and film.
Oh yeah, no. I also wanted to say that I do work at a library as well. It's kind of fun to be able to. I think those skills translated very well. I didn't have a library degree originally. I ended up working there, and so just being able to do that, being able to analyze literature and talk about like why you might like this one or why you might like that one has been very helpful in the library field. So yeah, I'm always very excited when I give people Tolkien books at the library. I'm not gonna lie. Those aren't my
Yeah.
only recommendations, but they are some of them.
I thought, and I told Nadia that to begin this episode, maybe we would talk about some of the things that we really like about the Rings of Power, and I think just kind of leaping off what we just said, one of the things that I appreciate is that if you dive into the show, you'll see that the writers, the production designers, the people behind the show spend a lot of time trying to think about the literature that they're bringing to life, as well as connections to other literature. From the show writers talking about how influential Paradise Lost was in their understanding of Sauron and what depiction of Sauron they're trying to give to the film. To You can see all over the internet, and we'll probably do a show where we show you some of those and walk you through in a way, hopefully, that will work on an audio form as well. Some of the famous paintings from history that you can see in the show, as well as recently, I know some people were pointing out, I think Rings of Power T on Twitter, which is T with Tolkien, and Caitlin Fascista, who's got a book coming out, which is exciting. But she pointed out that when Sauron reaches out for Galadriel at the end of season two, it seems to be almost an exact replica of Tolkien's drawing of where Sauron reaches out as the ring is destroyed and he reaches out to try to grab the armies of the rest of the West and then is blown away by a wind. That it seemed to be a replica, bringing to life on the screen of that picture. And of course, I hadn't seen that before, but when you look at it, it's just beautiful how they were able to frame that and make that work. And you can see a lot of that in the show. So that's one of the reasons that I love it.
Yeah, no. One of the my favorite classes that I remember from college was I took a class on Milton, and Paradise Lost like blew my mind. I think I had read some narrative poems from Tolkien. It's like some of his versions of Beren Luthien, for instance, are one of my favorites. And then I read Paradise Lost, and I was like, well, this is very much the standard. And so yes, their depiction of Sauron does kind of match up a lot with Satan. My favorite parts of Paradise Lost were Satan like thinking that he's like the coolest thing ever, and that he's really doing very pathetic and petty things. And yeah, yeah, Sauron does that a lot in this show, especially season two when he's like gaslighting King. Um, so yeah, I think one of the reasons I really ended up liking Rings of Power a lot too was yes, I love Tolkien. I've definitely like read Lord of the Rings and Hobbit a lot. Silmarillion wasn't really something that I got into as a kid. I kind of tried a couple times, and I'm not gonna lie that the chapters with the Valar kind of got me stuck there for a while because if you don't really know too much about it and there's no overviews, also shout out to Tea with Tolkien for nice overviews of Silmarillion that'll help you get started. But it was very hard to get through and kind of like get to actual stories and stuff. And season two of Rings of Power made me very curious about it. Also, shout out to Quincy because I don't know if you remember, this is one of those things where you get really excited and you would tell us stuff about Lord of the Rings. You at one point told me about Anachar, um, breaking into Eregion. And he was like, yeah, did you know that Sauron went around disguised as an elf and tried to talk everybody into like following him and stuff? And I was like, that sounds like a cool story. Never found it in the Silmarillion because it's at the end. um, but I saw that in season two and I was like, this is such a cool and interesting story, and it feels like there has to be more to it. Also surprised that that is such a small part of the Silmarillion.
Yeah.
um, but there's also lots of fun ancillary material, which I'm getting into. But yeah, Rings of Power season two convinced me to read the Silmarillion, and again, it was like very life changing. I'm like, How have I not read this before? I finally did get further into the Valar chapters, and I'm like, what I love about Tolkien too is a lot of his humor, and some of that does come through. Everybody's like, oh, Silmarillion is so dry, and I'm like, no, not really, not
No.
to me.
I mean, obviously there is the one chapter about the geography that can be pretty dry,
That word did
but
come to mind.
the rest of it, yeah, there's a lot of life there. I mean,
Here's a little
Tol
map.
Tolkien's humor shows up, I mean, all over the place. I think of how Morgoth is terrified of Tulkas's laugh. Ah, that's so
Oh
great.
my God.
He just, I don't, that whole Tulkas, he's a whole episode himself of how
Oh my
he's
gosh.
he's an angel from an alien world, which is like, okay, thanks for no more information about that. Who comes to Earth because he's like, oh, I can mix it up with Morgoth. He's like, what world could I go to where I can fight somebody? Ha ha!
Oh my gosh.
Really one of
Yeah,
the, I mean, except for Olmo, who like is a real one. Shout out to Olmo,
so
as
true.
great as he is. He except for Olmo, Tolkas is like my favorite of the Valar.
I love how it Rings of Power too that the dwarves kind of refer to Alway. I think that that's fun. I never caught that until I read Silmarillion. And I'm like, oh, that's what they're saying because they're referring to like their creator, which is another interesting story. But yeah, and also the person that Sauron used to work with back when he wasn't like working for Morgoth, where he's learning how to do forging work and stuff like that. Yeah, no. So Rings of Power definitely got me in Silmarillion. Also, I think that they got a really good cast together. That's another thing.
Oh
And
yeah.
also shout out to like Robert Aramayo who's got two different BAFTA nominations now. He's got one for Rising Star and then also for lead actor for his movie that's coming out. Plays Elrond. Also I don't want to hate on movie Elrond, but I want to hate on movie Elrond a little bit because I think he got just for the maximum drama with Arwen. I think they kind of made him a little meaner than he appears in the books, which is fair. You gotta have some drama, and I understand like he's sad about his daughter not going to join him, but I think that the Rings of Power portrayal is way closer to what you generally get for Book Elrond. And also after reading Silmarillion, his actions in season two, which have been kind of, you know picked on online. I think that makes a heck of a lot more sense once you realize all the elves going crazy about Silmarils. And he's like, let's not do that again.
Yeah.
The other
Oh
thing
yeah, when you mentioned the cast, I mean that was going to be my next thing is that I think the show is incredibly cast, and of course,
oh my gosh, yeah.
that's one of the things that's really missed by so many people. They just cast it really well, and even like Galadriel is one of those that like I do wish Morpha Clark did fewer lines with her teeth clenched. She usually kind of talks with her teeth clenched, but she is still a great actress and really good at what she does, and of course has a lot of the characteristics of Galadriel that you'd want to see, that kind of presence on screen that commands attention. Just everybody at every role is exceptional.
You get bugged by things. You're the Elijah Wood hater because you hate his eyebrows.
Yeah.
So
When
I
actors
probably
and
never would have
actresses do
noticed the
stuff,
Morphin stuff if you haven't pointed it out. Also, I'm just gonna say she does it less in the second season. She's
yeah.
holding all of her anger in the first season, Quincy.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. She's dealing with a lot and clenching her teeth, and I clench my teeth when my children fight for the 45th time in a day. So I understand. I understand. Yeah, no, the whole cast is amazing. And I think the writing, the dialogue in the writing is definitely better the second season than the first season, but it has its clunky moments. And to me, I'm forgiving about that because I think it's very hard to write dialogue for Tolkien, and
Yeah.
he doesn't provide very much of it in the appendices of the Lord of the Rings, which is the material that they're working with. But like, you were talking about the Silmarillion stuff. There are so many great Silmarillion Easter eggs in the Rings of Power that I think people are just really, really missing out on if they don't go and find those things. Like everything from Sauron speaking to the speaking to the warg which is totally
Yeah.
Sauron, King of the Werewolves, which is just such an awesome story. And then later on in that season, Sauron himself mentions Beren as being a
Oh my
hero
gosh.
of the humans, and you know that inside he's like swallowing his puke because of how much
He's
he hates
he's
Beren.
clenching his teeth on that one. That
Guy clenching his
chore. That whole thing must have been like, yeah, he's like holding back his vomit because he's mentioning all these people that have kicked his behind mostly and ruined his evil plans.
Notice he didn't want to
Yeah,
give
no,
rings.
that
He
one, and
didn't
I
want
was
to
like,
give
I was,
rings. He didn't want to give rings to dogs because he didn't want to have to mention Juan for sure.
yeah, no, he couldn't. That's still too soon. It's like, he chewed up my neck like a chew toy. That's a very Paradise Lost moment of Sauron where he's like, oh, who's gonna be the giant werewolf that defeats Juan? It's gonna be me. And in Backstreet Boy. No, not Backstreet Boy. You know. But psych, no, he's gonna chew on you like a chew toy, and then like do that thing where he's like,
He's
if
like,
you haven't read that part, you're missing out.
I'm gonna become the most impressive werewolf that anybody's ever seen. And Juan's like, no problem. I got it.
Oh my gosh, the other thing, which I'm going to give a shout out real quick, that one also, because Luthien is, of course, kicking Sauron's behind all the time, but like, she kind of gets taken aback for a minute because he smells so bad in that moment. That also gets a shout out in Rings of Power, where
Uh-huh.
they kind of
Uh-huh.
see the unseen world version of him, and she's like, it's just like, it smells so terrible. And he's like, crap.
And to be honest, maybe, this is kind of a good place to wrap up our first episode. That I think is just one of the things that people so miss about Rings of Power is how it can bring out things that the movies didn't really have time to delve into. And one of the things that is just so powerful about Rings of Power for me is that it makes the Lord of the Rings movies so much better, in my opinion, because Sauron is not just a disembodied eye on top of a tower, which was a choice I didn't love. I know why they did it and I understand it, but he's now a being, like you understand like about what he's about and the threat that he poses and what goes into that. And even things like you just mentioned, like Sauron, the name literally kind of means stinky one. That's what the elves came up with to describe him because of the darkness that's inside of him that makes him smell bad. And that coming out in the show, that scene where Celeborn's helper, what's her name? Mardanian?
Celeborn's Verdania is
Oh,
like, yeah,
sorry. Say
she's
Mardanian.
wearing the ring, so she sees the unseen world version of him, and it's not pretty, and it smells terrible.
Yeah.
But that really is very good dialogue writing. I'm also gonna say the other thing where his catchphrase for season two, especially, is like, "I have many names," which means "Don't call me Stinky One."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and if you look at like the translation, as the best that I could come up with of what the Uruks are calling Sauron in the opening scene in season two is something more like Myron. They're not calling him Sauron, they're calling him in their language what means like admired one. And they translate it on screen as Sauron so that you know who they're talking about. But I love that too. It kind of makes sense that he wouldn't allow them to use that name. And I understand in the show, like even Tolkien does it, the mouth of Sauron. I think we're meant to understand that he's probably not called the mouth of Sauron around Sauron, but everybody is trying to understand who he's talking about. So he calls himself the mouth of Sauron. They call him the mouth of Sauron. Those kind of things. So anyway,
Yeah, no, I'm gonna give one last shout out. Yeah, no, even as somebody who read the books and loved the movies, yeah, Sauron kind of was more of just an eyeball until the Rings of Power and reading Silmarillion. And I'm like, that's no patch on Tolkien and that's no patch on Lord of the Rings, but I'm like, he's not always as, you don't get all the background, you don't get as much of a fully formed villain. You kind of get all the things that he does and you can infer more, but it wasn't that real to me until watching the show, so shout out to that.
yeah, and that makes a big difference. Obviously, the book is The Lord of the Rings. It's about the threat that Sauron poses to all of us and what he represents and how it can destroy our world. And of course, part of the brilliance of what Tolkien does is that he doesn't spend a lot of times in time in Lord of the Rings, fleshing out the character of Sauron because there's this whole world that he's built behind there that lurks behind the scenes, and you get little glimpses of it. And Gandalf and Elrond kind of give you these little glimpses into what the real threat of Sauron is, and that's part of the brilliance of the book. But really, it can really enhance your experience of Lord of the Rings to understand
Yeah.
more about the person who is Sauron. So that's our
Mhm.
first episode. Thank you, everybody, and we'll
All
hear.
right, thanks.
We'll talk to you soon.